IVM.
On today's rebroadcast, we have Amrut Dhumal. Amrut talks about a whole bunch of educational apps and the kinds of possibilities that exist over there. This was a really interesting conversation I think you will enjoy.
Hey, welcome to Shunya One. I'm your host, Shiladitya. I'm a mobile technology entrepreneur, the co-founder of Hipcask and Rassilent. You can find me on @Shiladitya on Twitter. I'm joined in the studio with my co-host Amit Doshi, the founder of Indus Vox Media.
Yes.
Which brings you this podcast and a whole bunch of others. Where do we find you on Twitter, Amit?
My Twitter ID is Doshi Amit.
All right. So, here with me today, our esteemed guest is yet another old friend and a batchmate of mine from college.
This time, actual batchmate.
Actual batchmate this time. Amrut Dhumal, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Great. So where do we find you on Twitter, Amrut? And before I tell people everything about you, that I know all the dirty secrets from college.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Amrut Dhumal. It's simple as that.
Perfect. Great. So obviously, like I said, Amrut, I know from college. We have had some interesting times together.
I can imagine.
In our engineering college, which is obviously where all the parties happen, and this is the most happening kind of college to go to in India.
Yeah, with all the women and
absolutely,
all that, yeah.
Absolutely. There's so much that engineering gives to you as part of an education. So we share that heritage, but obviously that wasn't enough for Amrut. So I think he chose to go ahead with his MBA. He went to Duke University, and I'm sure he has a lot of interesting stories from there as well. But what we're here for today is obviously to talk about your own endeavor as an entrepreneur since then, running not just an actual school, but also in coming into the edtech space. So Amrut is basically an education tech entrepreneur, if I can call you that. And you're currently the co-founder at Mindseed Education. So
correct.
Why don't you just jump into and give us a brief background on post-Duke University? What got you into this?
So it's not really post-Duke University. So even when we were at college, I was setting up a school, right, in Kharghar.
Right.
So I was always interested in education. I considered myself a good teacher, and luckily, since it was my school, I was allowed to inflict myself upon others. But as I was chatting with Amit earlier, that I realized along the way that what I considered good teaching had very little to do with what kids learned. So that was sort of one of the starting points of where this whole system, that the edifice on which education is built, started crumbling for me. And then I've been pulling at those threads ever since. And in 2011, when I came back to India, I was joined by my brother who was at INSEAD. And what we said is that, look, we've seen that education needs to change, and let's try and change it in a big way. You know, we've had one school, and that school has become successful for its, or known for its, different kind of education. But can we sort of take this out? And that's it's that thing, just trying to make that better every year, that has now has you calling me an edtech entrepreneur. But
right.
But that's sort of where we are. We have, in the past 4 or 5 years, we now have about 40 odd preschools that we've set up. We've got 3-4 schools, and of course we are providing a tech backbone to this entire enterprise. We've also started going directly to parents now to help them help their kids learn in a personalized manner, and sort of really learn rather than be talked at. So that's been our endeavor in education.
40 schools, that's a crazy number of schools to start in. You're talking about a fairly short period of time.
Yeah, so I think we just invited that problem upon ourselves. That's the problem with having two ambitious people sort of trying to set up something, is that we got a little ahead of ourselves, and then we suddenly find ourselves, oh shit, today I have like over 40, 50
But it also means that there's so much latent demand.
There is. No, there absolutely is, right? I mean, every person who I talk to, right, all my friends have kids, and everyone I talk to is unhappy with school.
Yep.
Yeah, and in fact, that was going to be my first question on this on the show also, that I know you're out there to fix a lot of things in education, and we always say that it's broken. Mm-hmm. What did you see that is particularly broken and you think is the fundamental like fissure in the entire system.
And how do you think how is that fixable too?
Yeah, and obviously, which is what you're doing, right? So we always say that we both went through 4 years of college and 12 years of school before that, but I'm sure we learned something. Obviously, when you
did we learn it despite the system or because of it?
Exactly, and obviously not. I mean, you've gone abroad and seen other systems of education. Where you've obviously looked into it a lot more. So, what did you find was the fundamental crack?
So, have you read Harari's *Sapiens*?
Yeah,
I have actually.
So basically, and you should read it. But basically, his thesis is that everything is a lie. So we keep telling ourselves lies or myths for us to collaborate together. So it's easy for, let's say, rational people who consider themselves rationalists to say that, religion is a lie. But similarly, money is a lie. And all of these things. So you were the payments geek talking about. You were talking about money. And
last year November, a lot of money became a lie.
No, but
seriously, great callback to the last episode.
No, you were telling me this is what you like to do. So I thought I'd show you that I'm a quick study.
Thank you.
So if you think about sort of the holy trinity of lies in our education system, so sort of 200 years ago, the system that's built, it's largely just been incremental innovations on that, and the lies or the myths or the beliefs that form it are number one is that education basically means an efficient form of content distribution. Mm-hmm. Like that is, so even if you trace how education has evolved in that sense, so you have you started with a chalk and a board and books, and that was a huge innovation when it came about, and that made more people sort of understand and therefore collaborate largely. That got replaced by, let's say, smart boards, that got replaced by Khan Academy, and it got replaced by even MOOCs. If you think about it, they're all playing the same game to some extent, is that they're trying to more efficiently distribute content, and the MOOCs are trying to more efficiently distribute great content. Right. But really it is about that.
It's about someone having the knowledge in a structured form and you digesting it.
But if you think about it, it allowed a lot, as the system was growing, it allowed for a lot of things that weren't possible before. So everyone started creating a common language to speak to each other because they studied it in school. We started creating common mental models that we could apply in mathematics that we applied in college or didn't apply in college. But there was a base that you could choose to apply, and I think that itself was such a huge gain that for a long time it was a worthy myth, right? It was worth carrying that along. Sort of the second big myth is that ability is fixed, and if you see that, you'll see manifestations of this throughout. You have the brilliant minds like Sheila, and then you have people like me. Sheila is like the gifted guy, and then there would be the others. There'd be the IITians, and there'd be the guys who have to go to ITI.
And the guys who couldn't get in.
Right.
And then I just made it sound like I didn't want to.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah, but
I don't want to go to Harvard either.
Exactly. And when you think about even that system, that it's basically saying that there is an ability in each person, and the job of the system is to find those people with high ability and put them in the right space. So you'll see that with how we rank order kids in right. schools, or in the US you will track kids as
right.
This is
or your GPA scores
or your GPA scores, but you say those GPA scores sort of give you rights to higher resources,
correct,
right? Or even as we train athletes, we realize, I think it was Gladwell who spoke about this, is that we realize that a lot of the times the big difference between the great athletes and the not so great ones was only that when they were young, they were old for the class, so they were like bigger and stronger and therefore faster. And then everyone said like, oh, this guy's so talented, and then they invested more resources in him, and that kept perpetuating. So if you look at our system today, this is another huge myth that you will see across the system. What I like to think about then is that, okay, I know that these are myths, and there is scientific evidence that says that intelligence to some extent is heritable, and you could choose to believe that. But science also says that neuroplasticity exists, right? That you can change your brain through training. So you could choose to accept a different myth. You could choose to accept that, in fact, I can sort of change myself. And
nature versus nurture.
Yeah, and we know that both of them are true in some extent. But as a system, we've only believed one.
Correct.
We only believed that nature sort of rules this.
Right.
But when you think about this, what I find valuable to do is, once you realize that all of these are man-made lies, is that you can say that, can I change these lies? Can I accept new lies? Or myths or beliefs or whatever you want to call them.
Right.
But can I take a new myth and how do you say that one myth is more valuable than the other? Is that which one has more utility, right? If you think about it as an engineer, what's the utility function here, and sort of how much can I get out of this?
Yeah, like when you change the frame of reference of something, obviously.
Yeah. So if I innovate on the basis of this content belief, right? That means, so Salman Khan put out all these great videos, and he got a bump. But when you think, but then it stopped.
Mm-hmm.
The MOOCs, we thought that suddenly you provide all of this great content out there and it's going to solve all of the world's problems. I mean, there was a bump, but it stopped.
But it didn't significantly change the way we do things.
It didn't change, and that's because if you think about this, for 200 years, you've been riding this S-curve on the way up, and now it's sort of plateaued.
Right.
And every innovation that you do that's based on this fundamental assumption that what education is content distribution, or efficient, cheap content distribution of great content even. Like you can add a great, or you can add a cheap, and you can get a little bump, but it's not changing it's not changing that. You've hit a plateau there. So you can think, then you can rethink what is possible.
Do you think that, so you're talking about content distribution, right? In terms of education as a content distribution system, or that. Do you think that there are parallels to be drawn between the difference between how mass media content is consumed and now how you're seeing further niche content inside the internet space? Do you think there's a parallel to be drawn over there, just simply because the means of distribution are so much more efficient that you can now create content in a much more personalized and individualized way?
Yeah, so that's sort of the third myth of my trinity, is that we are all the same. Is the myth that we are sort of built on, and to the extent that we're different, it's heritable, and we can put you in different brackets. But if you want to think about analogies, you can think about the analogy in sort of finance. Is that every guy who's doing payments, who's doing all of this is backing, or Paytm, Visa. All of these guys are backing on one myth, which is the myth of money that was started by Alan Greenspan and the like, right? That these currencies float against each other, and that gives this thing value. And everyone is sort of innovating on that, and that is that's not as old as the education myths,
right,
which are 200 years old, but it is still it is still somewhere on that trajectory upwards, and they'll get some value out of it. Whereas blockchain, which I know he loves to talk about, has changed the myth, right? It says that really the utility of money is a measure of time, and that's the idea, and then you're not on the same curve as everyone else,
right,
and you're on a completely different curve, and I think that's the value of looking at these things separately, is that and particularly in education, because we have maximized most of the returns we can out of these myths, it's time to find new ones, right? And that's how I got. I mean, I wouldn't say that all of this dawned upon me on one fine day and I arrived at it, but working in the trenches, you start with this amorphous feeling that both of you spoke about, that there's something wrong here. Like you start with that, and you just keep pulling on the threads, and then you get down to these like sort of basic truths and see or basic lies, and then see, can I twist this in some fashion, and can I create a more powerful myth that can power the next wave of education, rather than try and create an incremental innovation on top of the current system. And that's sort of how we ended up approaching this problem.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, you have to tell us what it is, because I think the build-up has just been insane. But like you were saying, all these other guys in EdTech today, which we hear about, even today there are homegrown versions of, like, what Byju's is trying to do, what a whole bunch of other edtech entrepreneurs are trying to do. They're still attacking this from a technology-only angle. They're trying to make things more efficient via technology, which is typically what technology startups try to do as a fundamental basis. Where did you realize that there's more to this, and like, what's the model behind what you do at Mindseed?
Right. So if you take each of these myths, you can replace them with others, and when you do that, what the role of technology is changes. So. And it's not just, so we like to think of let's say Byju's or these MOOCs as technology, and everything else is not. But even when they came about, they were technologies, right? So we went from let's say a board and a book to overhead projector slides, which was the technology.
Right. Yeah.
Then you changed that, and then you got into PPT slides, and then you changed that, and you got into the audio visual thing, and each of these gave us bumps, and now what you're saying is that, okay, I can take this audio visual, what let's say the MOOCs or Byju's or people like that are saying is that I can take this audio visual idea and distribute it more effectively, which will still give some gains. Now, I'm not saying that it won't give any gains, but what we started to do is to say that can we change the basic function or what technology should do to this. And so when you think about the first one where we said it should be about content, today, I think Amit was telling me this, and I agree that content is largely become irrelevant, right? It's been competed away. You and I can't differentiate with each other on content because you and I both have Google, right? So it's very hard for you to do that. So then, if it is not content that is valuable, so if it's not knowing the what, then probably knowing the how that's valuable. So knowing skills, and we speak about this vaguely. We pay lip service to that. Skills are very important, 21st century skills. But you put it into a system that's only built to deliver content and
hence learn the skill. And that's the expectation.
Yeah, but that doesn't work so well, right? Correct. Because the system is built for 200 years to do one thing well.
Right.
And you can't just put a Band-Aid on top of it. You have to go underneath and really rip it out and say that I'm going to change how or what the system is optimized for, right? So one is that. The second really thinks about this idea that we are all the same, and inherently all of us know that this isn't true, right? You and I were in the same college, but we know each other. We're definitely not the same, right?
We know who partied more. We know who hung out at the girls' hostel.
I stayed at the girls' hostel, but that's a different story. But yeah, so this whole idea that we are different and therefore will have different paths is one to think about, and that can be a new idea or a new myth to sort of build around, and the third one is that is embrace that you can change it, right? Embrace that your ability is not fixed, and believe that you can change it. And sure, there is some heritability involved, but what we have to think about is which one is delivering the most value. So from this theory, let me just bring it back to sort of what it meant for us. And since we are largely running preschools, so these are like really young kids between 2 and 6 years old. Yeah. Now, how do we say that, or how can we start saying that these new set of myths, which is that learning is about skills, it's not about content, or not as much about content as it is about skills. It's not as much about
mass-made, and it's more individual.
It's more personalized, and it is based on a belief that you can change yourself, right? It's based on a belief that you can get better if you apply effort. So what does the result in for such young kids? Because it sounds like a very lofty topic.
Yeah, and it's also something, by the way, the concept of preschools is also otherwise in these 200 years fairly new, or is it not? Or am I mistaken? Because I know I didn't go to preschool.
Really?
And now it's become a thing, right?
What is preschool age? I mean, like
previous to KG, right?
Right.
So much more previous.
So nursery,
it
right?
starts from 2. It starts from 2 years old and goes to 6.
I mean, okay. Let me rephrase that. I think there was never any structure in this time when people went to nursery. The kids were going to nursery to just
Really? My nursery
play.
was part
there
of my school.
No, there was structure. So again, these are all pre-World War thoughts. So there was Montessori. Maria Montessori was
Correct.
someone who came up with a structure. There was Rudolf Steiner who came up with another structure. There was Reggio Emilia, which evolved a third structure. And
wow, you really studied during your MBA.
I don't know how much about MBA, but I generally read a lot. So, but yeah, so there have been these structures in the past as well, and they got it more right than did the rest of the education system even then. But still, when it gets applied, it gets pretty bastardized and it doesn't fit in the way it's supposed to. So let me just circle back to what I was talking about is how does this new way that I sort of hinted at based on these new myths, what is the end result? So again, I was chatting with Amit earlier, and that government really doesn't tell you what to expect of kids at a very early age. So according to our government, learning starts at age 6. Which is another myth, but for another time. But so then they tell you that what do I expect out of kids at the end of grade 2, which is about age 8. And what we did is we mapped that to what our kids are doing. And because we are a technology-based solution and we collect evidences of kids learning, we can have hard data to sort of map it. And let's say there are about 10 outcomes that they expect at the age of 8 or end of grade 2 on reading and writing. And when we mapped that to our data, we saw that all of our 5-year-olds and all of our 4-year-olds, 100% of them were doing all 10. Now,
so they were 4 years ahead.
3-4 years ahead, right? Because they were 5 at the beginning, maybe 6 at the end. There was sort of a range.
Definitely 2 years.
Yeah, so definitely 2 years ahead. But then we applied that same yardstick to even our 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds. And, so there we found that about 70% of them were able to do 5 out of those 10 things. And then we applied them to 2-year-olds, and we found that 90% of them were able to do one thing. So what I want to say is that if you build a system based on these new myths, the ability for you to have results or the utility function of that is very steep. Mm-hmm. Just because you're tapping into levers that others haven't used, right? And that sort of sits at the core of what we do. And then to your question about technology, so what should technology do in this, right? So if you think about basing a system on not on content but on skills, then you have to gain inspiration on what the system should be. Shreya might be a better example, right? How she learned to sing. She started with practice. Then that practice needed to be not just time spent, but focused time spent. Every day she was trying to hit some note or trying to do something that she couldn't do earlier, right? And she was trying to get better every day, which is a better version of practice. And then to top it all, she probably had a guru who sort of told her that, this is the right path of practice. This is what you should do first, then this. And he said these are the right strategies. And then he gave a feedback, right? That this is how you're getting it wrong at this time, and try this differently,
Right.
And through a combination of these 3 things, which is time, and then focus, and then sort of a master guiding you, you're creating a new system that is based on practice. And when I say new, the only thing new about it is that we had forgotten it, right? If you think about how you learned martial arts, or you think about how you learned classical music, you think about how you learned any of these skills, we knew that this is the way to learn it.
Right.
We'd forgotten because
we just never applied that to fundamental education.
Yeah, we didn't apply it to reading and writing, but or maths or any of these things which are skills. But then the reason is that you run up against this barrier that there aren't so many gurus, right? Mm. And then so many people don't know how to actually get there. So that's where technology should play a part, right? Technology should. And in our case, what we've done is we've basically seen how all of these kids learn, and we've plotted that path out, and that path is sort of encoded in the technology. we've looked at how what is the best way to get people to learn, and what is the best way our kids are learning, and we've sort of mapped that into the technology. So, and what is the feedback that will help this kid do better at this one specific thing? We put that into the technology. So you've basically enabled your technology to help everyone become a guru. And then, in the future, you can imagine that you with AI, you're then able to become the guru, right? For others.
The platform itself.
Yeah, the platform itself becomes that, and that's sort of how we're thinking about it.
So, if I understand this correctly, what you're saying is it's not about just changing the way you deliver. I mean, it's unlike pure content delivery. This is a lot more guided delivery of the what we are trying to teach to the kid. But it's also a system where you change the way you measure the output or whatever the child he or she is learning as well. So great. So I mean, I obviously want to dig a little deeper on this. Into maybe practicality from the theory we discussed. But let's take a quick break and we'll come right back.
Hello. Welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure that you do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We had a Christmas party in the office last week, and you can see pictures of that on our Instagram this week, so please do make sure that you do check it out. Like Cyrus says, Cyrus, Abbas, and I do a 2018 Rewind edition of Cock and Bull. The year's biggest political stories, controversies, sporting triumphs, to viral memes. We try and pack it all in an hour. I don't think we made it. On Advertising is Dead, Varun and Karthik Nagarajan, Chief Content Officer at Wavemaker, recap the year in advertising and give their predictions for 2019. On Simplified, tune into part 2 of their year-end special with special guest Tony Sebastian. On Thalle Harate, our Kannada podcast host Pawan Srinath talks about how the internet can be a scary place, as nefarious plots are hatched against companies, governments, and people online all the time. On the year-end special of Woody Woodpecker, Rachel takes a look back at the most popular words of 2018. This week on Pulyabazi, Pranay discusses the impact that space research has on an aspirational society and why the argument poor nations shouldn't spend on luxuries like space exploration makes little logical sense. Guys, it's been a great 2018, and we hope you enjoyed your journey with IVM. We're looking forward to bigger and better things in 2019. Please do tell a friend about the podcast that you've enjoyed. Try and spread the word. That's very important for us. And with that, let's continue on with your show.
Hey, welcome back. So we got really theoretical on education, man.
But very informative, right? I mean, I learned more about this stuff than I think I have ever thought. I've never thought about this stuff.
Yeah, I haven't taken my education ever this seriously.
No, I don't think so.
I didn't realize so many people had thought around.
No, but it's good to know that there are people making sure that we are not uneducated when we go to school, right? There's somebody paying attention to what's going on. That's good to know.
Yeah, I have a newfound respect for even the system which we are talking about, which is fundamentally broken. But at least there was a pattern to it, clearly. But I do want to get it.
The reason it worked for 200 years or more.
Exactly.
Right? So
exactly.
It did serve a purpose.
Yes, it did.
No, but what's more interesting is getting into how exactly you and hopefully all the other lot of folks in this space are trying to change that.
Right.
So getting more practical, getting a little more in-depth into what you're doing with the tech and with your hands-on education. How much of it is actual hands-on, like personal, like human-to-human interaction-based stuff, and how much can tech actually help you leverage to scale fast enough?
Right.
Like obviously as a concept, you explain how this is a new paradigm you're bringing in. But how do you distribute that all over the rest of the world, and how do you think this can go much bigger?
Right. So I guess two questions in there, and the first one is that how does it work now, and what does the tech do there? And the second one is then how do you take what works and then change the system more broadly, right? So so we can start with the first, is that look, so today when a teacher comes into the class on her phone, she's basically able to see what each child is doing, right? As I was mentioning, what we've created a path for each child to, let's say, learn. Let's take something simple, right? Let's say he's learning how to read. So the first step may be that he recognizes that print has meaning for example, that if he sees something,
letters,
not letters. So if you've written chair on your chair, he's able to understand that the thing written actually refers to the object, right? So that would be the first stage, that you recognize that whatever is written here has got meaning. Now you're giving me a quizzical look, because the first stage that we went through was A for apple, right? But that's a whole other kettle of fish. It's the most abstract thing. So we learn from concrete things, and we learn by trying out this stuff. So initially, what kids will do, as an example, is they will first, in their mind, the hypothesis might be that everything that is written is chair, and they'll point to everything and say chair, 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 and then they'll realize that no, this is not chair. This other thing is a table, and this other thing, these written things have different meanings, right? So you start from there, which is basically recognizing that print is meaning, then going on to recognizing that there are different things with different meanings, and then you go on to starting putting those things together, and then eventually you go on to read. So there is a path that every child follows, and we mapped that path in this kind of granular detail, right?
So one second, you're saying A, B, C, D, E, F, G is useless.
It is. It's actually super counterintuitive. But answer me this. How long have you known ABCD?
My whole life, as far as I can tell.
Can you tell me why A is in this way?
And why A has the shape it does?
Yeah.
No.
Like any idea?
I'm guessing it's just
some
English scholar whose name you know.
It's
has
evolved from Latin, no? So I mean, like, but why does Latin A have that? I have no idea.
There is no. So it was just a convention that people agreed upon, right? They said we're going to call this A.
Right.
And if you're thinking about when you're trying to impart this as the basic thing to a child,
right,
you're talking about something that's so abstract versus a chair, which is so concrete. We actually start kids off in recognizing their own name. Okay. Because that is the most concrete thing for them, right?
Right.
That this is me. That this whatever is written here is actually Shiladitya versus something that's written here that says Amit.
Right.
So once they start recognizing that it's concrete, it's applicable, that they can apply this learning. So they can point to things and say, table, chair, door, and immediately they're getting feedback that this is either
without
correct.
knowing the letters.
Right.
Correct or not. And someone's telling them, right, when she says, okay, she points to this thing in the corner and says chair, someone says this is a door, and she does it a few more times and then she'll figure it out. So this is how we learn, is through trial and error, and that's how human beings learn. But our system is not built for that, right? Because it was content distribution.
Right.
So it was not built for to understand how we learn. So that's why I say ABCD is the opposite of what you should be doing first, because you should start from things that every unit should be applicable.
Okay.
They should be able to apply it and see whether and they run like a scientist, you run a falsifiable test and you see whether this. I have a hypothesis that everything means chair, and I point to everything and say chair, and that hypothesis is wrong soon.
Correct.
And then slowly I narrow it down and realize that only these kind of things are chairs.
Right.
And if you start from that belief, then you're creating a system that can be that is leveraging the way humans learn, rather than thinking about it from an engineer's point of view, which is what is the smallest unit of language, which is the alphabet.
When you say this, I mean, it's interesting, and you think back. You don't need to know the fundamental building blocks of letters anymore. I mean, for you to be able to construct a sentence, you need to know grammar and those things.
you learn it also. So here's this example taken to the extreme. Have you ever heard about the chicken sexing problem?
No.
Cannot say that I have.
Okay, so
I'm really interested.
MBA textbook.
No, this is not MBA textbook. I actually learned it, or actually came across this while thinking about learning.
We've done pigeonholes in engineering. Chicken sexing has not been on the menu. So please enlighten us.
Yeah, so chicken sexing is this thing. So apparently it's very valuable in some Asian country, I forget, China or Japan, to be able to determine the sex of a chick as they're born. Right, to say whether this is a male or a female.
Right.
And at that, when they're just hatched, it's very hard for you to be able to tell. There are experts at doing this, and if you ask them, how do you know? They can't tell you. Right? So now, how do you train someone in chicken sexing? Is that you basically stand them next to the expert, and those, let's say Sheila is the amateur and Amit is the expert. So Sheila will pick up a chick and he will say either male or female, and all Amit says is yes or no, and that's it. And soon,
without describing
Amit
why,
can't describe. Like he doesn't know why he knows.
Right.
And therefore and soon you will learn this. The same is true with grammar. Like if I ask you what are the rules of grammar and English grammar and what are the exceptions, right?
Impossible.
There's no way you know.
Yeah.
But you look at a sentence and you say this is right or wrong. You can't tell why it's right or wrong. You've just learned this. All sort of
sounds right, or it sounds wrong.
Yeah, because there are some rules that you've imputed.
Yeah.
In my
And you can think about this in terms of how AI is evolving, right? So you start off with a whole bunch of rules that were explicit, and now you're realizing that you need to sort of impute those rules. Like it's much better just to give them training data and then for them to impute
and figure
those rules.
stuff out and find patterns.
Right.
And that's exactly what the fundamentals of AI are.
And when you think about that what AI is trying to do is to mimic human learning, but even for humans we are trying to do a rudimentary sort of machine learning, is that we want to give them all of these rules rather than letting them impute these rules, which is sort of the fundamental difference between how we learn and how our system is built, right?
Correct.
But that was a long way of answering some question, which is I don't
Lost
know.
in the
Which
ether.
is what you guys do. So that's what you do. You say this is a chair.
Yeah. So we start. So when we were, let's say you're a teacher entering the classroom. Every day you enter the class, you know on this where each child is on this step, right? What step each child is on this path, and you know what is the best strategy that has worked over these past 4-5 years to move the child from this step to the next step, right? And therefore, what you do is you present the child with this strategy, and why I'm using that very deliberately, because you are not teaching the child mostly. You're just giving the child material for him to try. And for him to struggle, and for him to fail, and then as he is failing, then at some point you will
course correct.
You will course correct, and you will give him some feedback. You might show him that this is right. You might model it in that sense, but a lot of the time you sort of give them to figure out what they're doing. So today, what the technology does is it takes all of this learning and makes it available to each individual teacher. So she behaves as a super teacher. Even though she may not be, right? So all her behaviors are of that one. So the child gets a super teacher experience with not necessarily a super teacher available, because as Shreya will tell you, there aren't so many super gurus, right? So you've taken all whatever that guru gyan is and you've encoded it in some way. Now and that's sort of what it does, or what it did, let's say last year. Now we've tried to see that. Can I take this and input that into the things or the products that the child is manipulating, right? So can I give him that feedback without having a person present? And that's what we're working on next. Is that can we sort of build things that give kids feedback as to whether they're doing this thing right or wrong? Things that get more and more complex as they go along. As kids are able to master one thing, you keep showing them the next one, and that are built based on sort of how humans learn. So today it needs a human to sort of
give you that personal guidance.
To give you that feedback actually into
in
the system,
appropriate
right?
way, I guess.
Also into the system. The human is telling, the teacher is telling me that this kid was able to do it or not, for example.
Yeah.
But tomorrow what I want to be able to do is...
How deeply do you capture this?
So
is it audio visual or is it
photos and videos, and all of these photos and videos form like a repository of evidence, and obviously they're tagged with sort of what level,
meta tags,
So what level, what was the skill that he was trying to learn, whether he could do it, so whether he's practicing or whether he's mastered it. So all of these are tags that are attached to that piece of evidence, and then that can be represented to the teacher in a different way, to the parent, because he only needs to see one sort of the journey of one, whereas the teacher needs to see what her question is, what do I do with this class?
Correct.
And my question is, where is this whole system going? So, but once you have that raw data, it's just representations of that, which are shown to everyone, so that they take the right action that they need to take.
Which brings me to the next question, which was, how do you see this scaling? So obviously you're recording so much information, you're collecting so much information, seeing execution of it, pulling that into a feedback loop of, okay, how can we keep bettering the way to do this? So how do you take this and go wide with it? And how do you see tech helping?
Yeah, that's a good question, and really the answer to that lay in what I was talking about earlier. Is that when this thing can really scale is when the system of feedback is in the product itself, right? And then what starts happening is I'm able to do all of the things that I needed a human being for. The child is able to figure these things out, because if you're saying that the child is imputing these rules, we just need to give him sort of stimulus or her stimulus that is engaging, that's at the right level, and then we need to give her feedback that whether you're doing it right or wrong. And through multiple exposures, they just keep moving forward, right? So that's what we are testing now. Is can we and sort of one of the directions we are going in is we are helping, or we are looking at some version of AR that can I take the stories that are in the storybook and put them outside. Mm-hmm. And if I put them outside, and then I can ask questions to the child related to those real world objects, right? So what would be boring today is to show a picture card of a lion and a tiger, and you have the word lion written and match this to that, which is what you have to do in a physical environment. But here you could have lions hidden everywhere, lions, tigers, and zebras. You should say, go and capture the lion.
With your phone.
With the phone, right? And this is sort of where we think then that kids will continue to be engaged with the system, so what the system needs is data. It needs whether the child is able to do this or not. But if it has to self-perpetuate without the adult sort of creating the right environment, then it has to be engaging enough for the child to want to continue to give the system data. Right. And that's sort of how we think, like, if we are able to crack that problem, this is one route we are exploring some others, but if we are able to crack this problem, then you can really hit scale. Because then you've removed the human being from the situation.
Download an app and start.
Yeah, and then you download an app and start.
Which is what a lot of everyone else in Edutech is.
Right, but so then the physical locations you think are going to decrease in importance from what you're doing? Because I'm guessing that's a big part of what your business challenges are, right? Setting up the locations, getting the school permissions, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the school locations, so if you think about learning, the one thing that no one has been able to beat is the actual classroom.
Right.
And the only reason for that, despite all of these problems that we spoke about it, is that learning is an inherently social enterprise.
That's what I was thinking, right. Which is why I was...
Yeah, so it is an inherently social enterprise, right. and therefore you have to be able to create some sort of society around it,
right,
that encourages you to keep learning, right? And that is so I don't imagine that all learning is going to be without humans.
Right.
Now, whether those humans are physically in front of you or virtually there, we don't know.
Right.
But it is true that learning is social, right. and we can't. I mean, we benefit a lot more from learning from each other than we would
in
otherwise.
Learning in a group,
or so there, like, why to learn, right? So if you have 2-3 people trying to solve this thing with you, play this game with you, work on something with you, you're doing it. You're gaining motivation from all of you doing it. Right. That's why tennis players, while practicing, will they won't just hit the ball against a machine. They'll want a live player, even if that player is not. They practice against a human being, because that human being pushes you to better yourself, right? So this aspect is definitely there. While I spoke about this idea that you can take this directly into the product, sort of the intermediate step is making it easy for anyone to run these kind of classrooms.
Right.
That's I went to step 3, but to answer his question, that how does it eventually hit full scale? But in between, you basically say that, okay, look, yesterday I needed to control the entire system.
Right.
But now I've put a lot of that intelligence into the system itself. So now Sheila can start his own system.
So the format of the classroom itself will become much more easily replicable. You don't have the same kind of fixed...
anywhere in the country, let's say a small village somewhere, technically, a teacher who wanted to be a teacher could just pick this up and start a classroom for themselves. And without having the need for a structured, formal content distribution.
Correct, right. Yeah, so, that makes sense. That actually sounds good.
And that exactly, I mean, even the other pre-existing content distribution, now I'm just going to use the word very casually. Everyone else who is still in that zone, in that mode of, hey, how can I get, my videos out or my app and my so on out there, is also hoping on the same thing. So I think the wave of using platforms like this, even though they differ in their approach, has at least catalyzed that movement of not having a school to go to.
Right.
It need not be a school and wearing uniform and, he's sitting somewhere, but it'll be a group. It'll be a huddle of some kind.
No, I think it's important that, obviously Amrut knows a lot more about this than I do, but my thought is that I think it's important that kids have a place to congregate. Right. And study in collaborative ways, right? So I think that I think so.
Correct. So that's where that is being already distributed.
It's not just kids, right? It's all humans. So despite all this work from home stuff, why do we still go to the office, right? And it's in particularly in Bombay and Bangalore, it's so inconvenient to go to the office, but we still make that trek because we need each other to sort of feed off and do things, and people that have cracked this virtual thing invest a lot of time in almost behaving as if they were there, right? So yes, it's not just kids,
right?
All of us learn like this, and so we are sort of reversing the system upon ourselves. It's not just for kids, but we are making the personalization for teachers as well. So how do we train teachers also needs to follow the same principles.
I think that's actually probably that there are some really, really bad teachors.
There are a lot of reasons for that too. I mean, that it's part of the system.
It's part of the system, right? So
teachers don't feel validated or I don't know. I know a lot of teachers aren't really enthusiastic about their job. In fact, there was a statistics
because they're content distribution machines, right? If you think about what the system values about them, is their ability to distribute content with high fidelity is what a good teacher is.
Correct.
For the system. Now, correct. You and I liked our teachers, if you did, for different reasons, that they actually paid attention to you and they did these human things that that sort of made it worthwhile. But that's not what the system wants from them, and the system wants them to distribute this content with less errors.
No, so which is I was saying there's definitely a statistic of lesser teachers getting into the system, the archaic system which we're talking about, right? I think less people now year on year less. Them. Yeah, because we don't pay them. So,
but because we realize that they're just So if you think about the previous state of the art of education technology, it was to replace the teacher with a smart board. Right. Or replace the teacher with videos and say that it's impossible for me to train all these teachers, so let me just say that the teacher's job is not to teach anymore. Like, she doesn't distribute this content, someone else will. And that worked for some time, but that obviously then means you've broken this idea that a teacher is valuable.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
and she feels it. So if you make a person feel not valued, then
they'll stop joining. In fact, I want to take away from the last question also about taking this to scale. Mm-hmm. Where and in your current model, you're obviously in the preschool stage today. What about higher education? What's your thoughts on that? Because again, there's a whole lot of technology, like even MOOCs today and everything are focused a lot on higher education. Yeah. Probably, I don't know the reason behind that. I think it's just because the amount of information, the sheer workload increases over.
No, the content was less freely available, right? So if you think about the value of the MOOCs, was that they were taking Harvard and Stanford and Duke and all of these professors who otherwise you could not get access to, and put them on this system, right? That now everyone can get access to this. And theoretically, this would have worked very well if all it took to make Harvard great was those professors, or at least their lectures. Clearly it isn't. One is that Harvard and Duke and other places are great just because we don't know any other way of signaling credibility. So they're just a signal, weak one at that, but they're so weak in terms of low fidelity, but very powerful signal in some ways, right? So just because you've gone to Harvard, people perceive you differently. Because I went to Duke, people perceive me like, oh, he must be smart. It has nothing really to do with whether I am or not, but that's the signal, and that's why they succeed, is because, like I think you touched upon this as an idea, but we have no way of knowing, or our measure is so weak of
it's
of
very
competence.
Even early days, even for those platforms. But where do you see a system like this, a whole new paradigm going up the age bracket of education, especially because... So
let me talk in our context. So in our context, what's happening is that mothers who have to, and I'm saying mothers because they clearly, fathers
don't give a shit,
don't care.
Wow, that was a eye opener on that.
Yeah, so we were actually talking to fathers, and they spend more time choosing their next phone than they spend in choosing their kid's school.
Across all 40 schools? So how many fathers? I'm not
saying I've spoken to all of them, but this was, we would...
A sample set?
This was a sample set.
That's alarming.
And we just stopped talking to fathers after that. We're like, there is no point. If this person doesn't care, then...
That's very alarming.
Yeah, no, but it's quite alarming.
But it depends on the age. Maybe it's just because they feel that's not the age where I can influence.
No, I don't know, man.
I'm not a father myself.
So again, all of my friends' kids, right? And there's a significant difference between mom's involvement and father's involvement. It's not even like close.
Yeah.
Like father won't even know that kid is taking tennis classes. Right? I mean, it's like, wait, she's taking tennis classes? I didn't know that. When did that happen? I mean, I hear these conversations on a regular basis.
This is sad.
No, but of course, this is not universal, because we are all different, right? There'll be fathers that are...
Of course, there are people who are involved. There are people super involved.
And all that. But, so moms are coming back to us and telling us that please do something for my kid, because now he has to go to a school, and you don't have. There's no.
He's going to be bundled into that whole system,
right? And he is suffering already. So and whereas he used to do so well, he is suffering already. Can you do something? So we are like, okay, we'll make this program extensible, and you can send your kid back to us after school, which is something that's starting to happen now. But then we're working on other experiments, like so. You and I have spoken a lot about getting engineering talent, right? Like, where do we find it, and all of these things. So we now have about 8 or 9 engineers, and we're saying, can we apply these same principles? Because these guys are out of college and stuff, and they don't really know anything, because
because that's the system. Is awesome.
Yeah. So what we are doing is that can we do the same thing for them? Can you build a system that helps them get better every day, right? Can measure, so that they know where they are and what's the next step they need to do to get better, and we are building it by sort of turning our tools upon ourselves. So I'm working with our CTO, who is a great engineer, right? So he's from IIT. He was in Yahoo for a long time. Went to Samsung in Korea. Ran his own machine learning startup, and now what we are trying to do together is that what is the difference between you and them, and can we map that path, and then can we help these guys walk one step at a time towards that path, and we're already sort of seeing, there's only been a few months since we started playing around with this idea. We're already seeing that it's having results in the way our engineering team is learning, right? And then if we are able to make this system work, then you've got you're in higher ed, right?
Yeah.
So then we suddenly have a product for higher ed. But it's somewhat like what Amazon did. It had to build it for itself. Like we just have, like, knowing what we know about learning, we're like, we have to put this system upon ourselves, right? We have to be able to create better engineers. Tomorrow I want to be able to create better managers, because management school and what I have to do as a manager are two very different things.
Exactly.
Like they don't match. But if I'm able to create better engineers or better managers, then I'm in higher ed, and then my myths, which are currently being applied to 0 to 6, can then be applied to 20 and up, right?
Wow,
and that's
I think that's going to be incredible if you can really break it down like that.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it is great fun to start working on it, because like, all new products are a lot more fun than scaling the old ones. So we have to remind ourselves that our primary day job is here. But yeah, so Praddy and I, we love playing around with this idea, and because we get to apply it to ourselves, it's a live experiment, right? So it's a lot of fun.
I think so. It's great that the way you're explaining this, if I have the insight right, is the ability to create this sort of journey and path and key milestones, if you may, along that, is a fundamental part of how you are, or your platform disseminates education, right?
Right.
The fact that there is a goalpost to get to, which has certain parameters, and then there are various steps in between.
Yeah.
Which you think even today, when you say it like that, that's what all education systems are supposed to do. But the parameters you measure along the way are obviously different. So
yeah, they're skill-based versus being content-based is one.
So
and
there are no exams.
So every day is an exam, right? So if you think about it, what this system means is that so for this to work, or for it to work most efficiently, is that every day you need to be presented with a challenge that is neither too hard for you, so that you don't just pack it up and run away, as lots of people did when faced with maths in school, right? And it's not too easy, so you don't get bored. Like Sheila got totally bored in college because he was just so smart.
Yeah, sure. That's the reason.
So and when you think about that as a challenge, and so so maybe engineering wise it may appeal more to you, is that you break down engineering into problems that they need to solve, right? And each problem is harder than the other. Yeah. And then on the other axis, you measure how well they can solve it, which means that do they need help with the solution completely? Like, does someone need to walk them through how to
each aspect of it?
How to do that? Are they able to sort of, if I give them that these are the parameters of the solution, can they solve it now, or can I just give them the problem and they'll be able to solve it? Or the last step is, are they able to come up with what should be the next problem, right? And those are the measures of competence on for each problem, and then you'll have different problems that keep getting harder and harder, and in the context of it will be the language. So for example, we are using Clojure and ClojureScript. That will be the context around which you're solving problems. So that's and then there's how well you solve them. So that's how we're looking at building up this competency-based system for engineers.
Wow. No, I think it's remarkable. I think the way you've tilted the whole content distribution of education to actually more performance and skill based. I think it's a very interesting paradigm. I really hope to see not just this being applied to where you are directly, but hopefully a whole lot of other platforms try to understand this sooner rather than later, and we really start seeing results across the board.
Yep.
So great. I think we had a awesome time just talking about so much about education, more than what I actually thought we'd end up talking about. I just thought we are going to just talk about how bad everything is.
Yeah, actually we didn't even get into that, did we? We were gonna when we first started, before we started, we were talking about what we were going to talk about, and we were all like, okay, education system sucks. So we didn't get into that at all, right? So we just started talking
Amrut,
about
you're obviously a great teacher, because you inspired all of us to just believe that there's so much better to be done out there, and I'm more than proud personally, and I'm happy that there are folks like you trying to do this in education tech, and obviously tech is playing a part in there.
Yep.
And soon we'll we'll have AI teaching kids. Hopefully good things.
Yeah, hopefully.
But thanks so much for being here on the show, man, and thanks so much for talking to us all about this.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Sheila. Thanks, Amit.
Great. All right. So before we go, let's just find where do we find the show, Amit?
Right. So basic housekeeping stuff, right? So IVM podcast, IVM website, all the other places where you could want to listen to podcasts. Also, very, very important, very, very necessary. Please go to the various podcast places where you listen and give the show a rating or review.
All right. And yes, like Amit said, don't forget to leave reviews on iTunes if you're listening there, and also to join our Slack channel.
Right. And just so you guys know, I mean, we've got a way to, Shiladitya is regularly posting articles over there for commentary. So please put up your thoughts and stuff like that. What do you think about the stuff that he posts?
Yep. If you don't already listen to all of that on my Twitter anyway, but please do jump in. We'd love to chat with you there and listen to suggestions on who we can talk to next and what kind of topics we can talk about. All right, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Did you know that Parsis in Mumbai, instead of being left at the Tower of Silence after they die, are now cremated? And why? Because a cow fell sick in the early 1990s. Did you know that the smog in Delhi is caused by something that farmers in Punjab do, and that there's no way to stop them? Did you know that there wasn't one gas tragedy in Bhopal, but 3? One of them was seen, but 2 were unseen. Did you know that many well-intentioned government policies hurt the people they're supposed to help? Why was demonetization a bad idea? How should GST have been implemented? Why are all our politicians so corrupt when not all of them are bad people? I'm Amit Verma, and in my weekly podcast, The Seen and the Unseen, I take a shot at answering all these questions and many more. I aim to go beyond the seen and show you the unseen effects of public policy and private action. I speak to experts on economics, political philosophy, cognitive neuroscience, and constitutional law so that their insights can blow not only my mind, but also yours. The Seen and the Unseen releases every Monday. So do check out the archives and follow the show at seenunseen.in. You can also subscribe to The Seen and the Unseen on whatever podcast app you happen to prefer.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, a show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.